Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I am back feeling much better today. I've been under the weather with a terrible sinus infection-y earache thing going on, but I feel much better today. Still a little bit funky, but no more horrible pain. So I'm just easing into doing a few things by doing a video on elemental dignities. I get asked this question a lot, or I have gotten in the past. I actually haven't for a little while, but it's been on my list because people for a little while kept asking about it in live chat. And so I have been meaning to do a video on it, and so that's what I'm going to do today. So I went through and kind of refreshed myself on it. I'm going to put a link in the description bar to a really good website about elemental dignities. I found that to be very helpful in just kind of condensing all the information. They have a full dictionary, a full walkthrough. I mean, they really go above and beyond. It's a fantastic site, so I'm going to stick that in the description box below, so make sure you check that out, because this is just kind of an overview and giving you an idea of what does it mean and how do you use them. And so I'm going to be using my Tarot of the Spirit deck because I want to. Number one, just because I want to, and number two, because I did go in and put the elemental associations for the majors onto my Tarot of the Spirit cards, because it has all the astrological. I really wish they would have put the elemental in there as well, on the majors. So that's why I chose to do that. So the question will be, let me mute my phone because I heard it go off already. So the question is, what are elemental dignities and why would you use them? So elemental dignities is understanding, is taking what we already have in tarot, right? As a breakdown of the elements, we have the four suits, right? We have fire, we have air or wind in this deck, we have water or cups, we have earth or pentacles or discs. And we understand that the elemental energy plays a large role in tarot. The major arcana suits are also associated with elements. Some of them more than one, and some of them people have different correspondences for them. So I'm going to walk through the ones that I use, but again, you may have seen them differently. Some of them are pretty steadfast, where everybody kind of usually sees the Emperor as a fire for Aries. So there are some that are more concrete than others. Some have a couple different choices. I've gone with, in the past, just what seems to resonate with me, and that's how I've just gone about it. But you will see differing ones, just like you'll see different seasonal correspondences. So in elemental dignities, what you have is a system of paying not just attention to, okay, this card is, so if you have a 3-card spread, this card in the middle here is one element. Okay, we can talk about that. This one's another element. But it also then says, how do those affect each other in a reading? So the understanding elemental dignities is more about using cards in a group and how the elements of each of the cards can strengthen or weaken the cards that are next to it, and based on the way in which we understand classically how elements match up together. And so the basic understanding is that fire and air are both active and they are both friendly to each other, and so they can strengthen each other. Water and earth are both passive and they are friendly with each other and they can strengthen each other. Fire and water are enemies. Think about it. I mean, it just makes sense. Water can put out fire, fire can evaporate water. They are enemies, and so they will weaken other cards. If they're next to each other, they will weaken each other. Air and earth are enemies that weaken each other. Fire and water I just said fire and water. Sorry, fire and earth are neutral, and then they can still strengthen each other, but it's a milder strengthening. And water and air are also neutral, but they can bolster each other up a little bit. So those are the basic dignities of, or the ways in which the elements correspond with each other. Right? And so you can look at, if you have pairs, if you're using two cards, let's first, before I'm going to get ahead of myself, this is one of those things that I need to be more precise. So I'm going to real quick, obviously it's pretty easy to know what the elements are in the minors, right? I think we all pretty well have that down. But you do need to at least understand what your majors are so that you can, in a reading, be able to do this with elemental dignities. So I'm going to do a quick run through of the elemental dignities that I personally use for majors, and this is pretty much based off of what you'll find in Benabel Wen's Holistic Tarot. Some of those have had two choices, two ways it worked. I've narrowed it down, all of them, to one that makes the most sense to me. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on why they're the way they are. A lot of them are based off of the astrological signs that they're associated with. You can look up elemental correspondences of major arcana cards and just kind of see for yourself what it is that you want to approach them as, if you don't already have that in place. But very often it's because of the astrological sign. So for the, like example, for the Emperor, he's associated with Aries, which is a fire sign, and so then he would be a fire. Or the Sun card very clearly is associated with it is fire, and as well as is associated with fire astrologically. So those are generally why they are what they are. So for the Fool, I use air. For the Magician, air. The High Priestess, water. The Empress, earth. The Emperor, fire. The Hierophant, earth. I love this Hierophant card. The Lovers, air. It's making a decision. It's a mental. The Chariot is water. Strength is fire. The Hermit is earth. The Wheel of Fortune is fire. Karma, or this would be justice as well, as is air. The Hanged Man, water. Death would be water. Temperance, fire. The Devil, earth, physicality. The Tower, fire, very volatile energy. The Star, air. The Moon, water. The Sun, fire. Judgment or resurrection as fire. The World or the universe as earth. And then of course we get into the actual elemental cards. So that's how I particularly use elemental associations with the major arcana. So that was important to establish at the get-go. So let me go ahead and give these a good shuffle, because they are all in order from the challenge, but I've been quite eager to shuffle these because I haven't been able to use them. That's the only bad thing about using it in the challenge, is I've been wanting to keep it in order so I can easily find it, but I needed to shuffle these, so I will just have to search. Now, if you go to that website that I have linked to you, they have it broken down into reading the element of either pairs or in triads, because it makes sense, because either you're going to look at two cards that are next to each other and decide, or you're going to be looking at what's on either side of something and then deciding. I very much use, I don't always use it with two, but threes are interesting because I do I always, when I do 3-card draws, I do always look to the middle card as being the focus, and so it works. But we're going to get there step by step. I just want to make sure this is well shuffled. Okay. So we've talked about how the elements, it's pretty easy to when you're thinking about pairs, because I should have done this before. Silly me, silly me. So if an element is next to its own element, right? So if we have the Father of Fire and the element of, or the Emperor, which is also of fire, those two cards are going to be supporting themselves. And because this is fire, these are both very active and they're very supporting each other. And so this is going to be a lot of fire. Now you always have to think too, well, that's a lot of fire energy. That could be a little bit volatile, you know, if you have a lot of fire in a reading. But let's just stick with, you know, 2 cards at a time. We should move in a little closer, shouldn't we? There we go. So let me put out a little bit further so when we do 3s, we don't have to keep adjusting the camera. So here we have 2 fires. It's both active energy and it is also, they're supporting each other. So these are going to be in full swing with each other, right? So if we, though, let's say we have the fire, I'll just leave this fire here so I can just try to find one other one that will give us an example. If we have fire and water, then they kind of cancel each other out. They're weakening each other. And so it doesn't mean that we don't read these cards. We do, but they're going to have in a reading, if they're showing up next to each other, they're going to have a little bit less influence on the reading itself because they are opposing energies that are going to cancel each other out. Now, if we leave fire in here, I'm just going through it with the fire so you can kind of see. If we leave fire in here and we put, say, an air sign, let me, of course, find an air sign. A little harder to do when you're always looking for it, isn't it? It's always whatever is most looking for that you can't find. So here's a wind, which is an air. So we have the Father of Fire and the Father of Wind. These two are friends with each other. They're both very active and they're going to support each other. They're not as powerful as when you had the fire and fire, which is the strongest combination, but they are very supportive of each other. And it's a very active energy that's going on here. Now, if we have the last combination that fire could be with, would be with earth, which is one of those that they are neutral with. They kind of are neutral, but it's still supportive. I should have done this before. So here we have it with earth. So fire and earth, they're kind of neutral to each other. They're not canceling each other out. They aren't bolstering each other up. They can bolster a little bit. There is a little bit of supportiveness there, but it's pretty neutral ground here. They don't cancel each other out. They're just going to kind of pretty much stay with their normal energy level, would be, if that makes sense. So that would be an example of how earth, for how fire might interact with the card, with a single other card. Now let's just do the converse. So if we do, and get an air one, which I shouldn't have put back, and then I'd still have one. Here we have a wind card, the brother of wind, right? So if we have air with another, now I gotta find a second one. If we have the brother and the father of wind, right, that's going to be really powerful, but it's also a lot of mental stuff going on. So we're kind of saying, whoa, we got a lot of crazy mental things going on. But this is the strongest, right? They're both active and they are both supporting each other. This is strong energy here. If we have wind with fire, again, very active and they're going to support each other. If we have air with earth, that is, cancels each other out. That's not gonna, they're not gonna be very powerful because their dignities kind of cancel each other out. And then lastly, if we have air and water, this is that neutral energy. They don't really bolster each other or smother each other. They just kind of stay at their normal energy tone. And then you can go on and do the same thing with the sets of the different elements that we have. And so we can see with 2 cards, how, I guess I should just finish them. Should I just finish them? Okay, so here we have Earth. So if we have Earth with another Earth card, they're going to support each other quite strongly. This is going to be very strong energy. So if these 2 cards show up in a reading, 2 Earth cards show up in, they bolster each other, they support each other and lift that energy up even higher. And if we have it with water, which is their friend, these are both passive energy. So we do have a lot of passivity though going on, and we have to pay attention to that. But we're kind of staying pretty basic here. But they support each other. They're both passive and they support each other. If we have it with fire, earth and fire, I'm sorry, earth, yes, I'm doing earth. Earth and fire are neutral energy. They're not going to do anything one way or the other. It's just going to stay their pretty much their basic energy. If we have earth and, what am I missing? Wind? Do we not do wind? Earth and air cancel each other out. And so we are just going to stay pretty much, you know, it's going to reduce them. They're going to be a little bit, they're lower. They're kind of block each other out from having much influence on the reading itself. If we go with water, which would be the last one, and we have 2 waters, then those are going to bolster each other. That's strong energy, overwhelming energy. It may be too much water energy going on, especially when you start to see 3 waters together. When we look at the triples, then it starts to be really a lot of water going on, and then you can say, okay, we might have a lot of emotional stuff going on here. But in general, 2 waters, they're going to bolster each other and they're going to be stronger for it. When we have water and earth, these are friends. It's going to be a little bit passive energy, but they're friends and they support each other. So this is going to be more influential on the reading itself. When we have water and fire, who are enemies, so to speak, they're going to cancel each other out. The fire can evaporate the water can put out the fire, and they're going to kind of cancel each other out, and they're not going to have much influence on the reading itself. When we have it with wind, I think it's wind. When we have water with wind, it's neutral, and they really don't help or hinder each other. They just kind of stay the same. And so that's how the elemental dignities would look in 2 card, when you have pairs, when you're just looking at 2 cards that are sitting next to each other. Now, I think that where elemental dignities can really shine are in 3 card readings. And so when we get to a 3 card reading, when you're reading traditionally, now this is based sort of on the Golden Dawn system here. I'm just laying 3 random ones out. When you lay 3 cards out, and you're reading with elemental dignities, then the middle one is the focus, and then the 2 on either side are in some way modifying the middle card. And that's how you go about reading sets of 3 when you're using elemental dignities. And so now what's interesting, this whole thing is, to me, is quite fascinating, although I think it's maybe a little bit, I'll be interested whether this works to be very helpful or not, because I think it can also be a little bit confusing. But say, for instance, let's leave the fire here and let's add the water. So what we do is, when we're looking at triads with using elemental dignities in a spread, we are looking to see the importance or the effect that this middle card is going to have on the overall reading. Now obviously it's just 3 cards, then this is going to show us how strong this is. If it's in a spread of multiple cards, I really like to use elemental dignities in like a 9 card spread, because you do very strongly get that understanding which cards are strongest. But if we look and we have fire and water, these two cards are enemies. Fire and water are enemies. And so they cancel each other out and really don't have much effect on this card. So this card kind of just stays at its base level of importance in the spread. However, because this is air, if we had, say, okay, so if we have 3 wind cards or 3 air cards, this is very powerful. This tells us that this central card, and we also read these other cards. It's not that we don't read the cards around it, but we now know that in this reading, this card is having a very strong influence on the querent, on the situation at hand. This card, whatever card this is going to have a strong impact on the situation, on the querent, on the reading itself. Same thing with this. If we have fire and wind, they bolster each other. This one really bolsters it, but fire also is bolsters it up. And so this card is going to be very influential in the spread. Now let's take the wind to start and look at this, how this would be if we were doing this with 3s. If we have 3 winds, this energy is very strong, right? We have very strong energy of air energy, and this card, the central card in the reading, is going to be very impactful. It is going to have a high impact on the reading, on the querent, on the situation that is at hand. This card is one that's going to have to be given great weight to, because it is surrounded by air, right? Now, if we let's just stick with the strongness factors. If we take wind and water, these are friends, right? So they support each other. It's not going to be as strong as having a wind around it, but it's going to be fairly supportive. And so it's going to kind of, they're air and water are neutral, but they can strengthen it up. So this is going to have some impact, but not as strong as impact as if there were 2 winds around it. Now, if we had 2 earths, which is its enemy, so air and earth are enemies, and they weaken. This card would actually be weaker in the spread because it is surrounded by cards that dampen it down. And so earth, when you put it, it's going to push in on the air pockets that are there, and it's going to trap that air, and it's going to weaken it. And so this card is not going to have as much influence on the spread as if it were with its 2 of its own, or 2 of at least ones that are kind of neutral energy to it, like water. Now, if we have, did I do fire yet? That's wind. Okay, here's fire. Let me find another fire. If we have fire on the other side, we are, again, it's going to have strong, this is going to have a strong influence. These are both active energy cards, and they are supportive of this card. So it's not the strongest combination, but it is the second strongest, and it will bolster that card up, and it's going to have quite a bit of impact. Now, of course, very often it's not going to be single, it's the same thing on either side. So that's when we start to get into, say we have fire and water on either side. Well, we know that fire and water cancel each other out, and so this card is just going to have its own influence. It's not going to have anything that's supporting it. It's not going to be tamped down. These are pretty much not doing anything for the importance level of this middle card. Doesn't mean we don't read these cards or read this card. It just means there's no extra umph or flattening effect going on of this particular middle card. However, if we had, say, fire and earth, well, earth is negative to this, right? Fire and earth are neutral, so they aren't going to cancel each other out, but it's not going to be real strong. The fire is going to form a bridge to the wind and bolster it, Earth isn't really going to do anything to it. And so you start to even look, what is the card that's bolstering it, and what does that have to say? What is the card that doesn't really have any effect on it? What does that say in a 3 card? It gets to be so many layers that you can start to pull out of a reading even more in depth when you start to look at it in this fashion. And we'll get to, reading it, doing an actual reading of it, so that you can see how it actually works, because I think that this can be quite confusing. And so that's how you go about doing. And of course, the same thing happens if you're going to swap it up. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but the same thing goes if you're going to have a water card, right? If you have 2 water cards on either side, this is going to be a very powerful card in the reading. It's going to have strong influence. If we have, on the other hand, 2 fire cards, do I have 2 fire cards on either side of the water, that's going to weaken it. This is going to be weakened by having 2 of its enemies on either side of it, and so on and so forth. Earth will support it. It will be pretty strong, just not as strong as if it was all water. You're going to have a lot of receptive energy versus active energy, and so all of it will start to affect each other, and you can start to give a layer of meaning to the reading because of these elemental dignities. So the important thing to get down at the beginning, and here I have them written out, but you can find these charts in the link that I'm giving you to the description box. So you just have to come to an understanding that fire and air are both active and friendly. Water and earth are both passive or receptive energies and are friendly. Fire and water are enemies that weaken each other. Air and earth are enemies that weaken each other. Fire and earth are neutral. They can still strengthen. And water and air are both neutral that strengthen. So you just need to, that's the key of what you really need to have an understanding with. And then the rest is you're applying these principles in different situations. So let's see what that really means though. Okay, so all right, you're thinking, I'm kind of with you, but I'm not entirely sure where you're going with this. So let's see how this might actually work in a reading. And again, there are, this is based off of those correspondences are kind of based off the Golden Dawn. It's kind of classic elemental. How do elemental energies work with each other? If you go into real classic, it has to do with whether it's dry or moist, whether it is hot or cold, and there's this kind of a chart that you get to that way even with geomancy. But there are different correspondences, and with anything, the important thing is that you pick out, you come to and accept this is the elemental dignities that you're following, and you simply stick with it. With all things divination, in my opinion, the key is that you are consistent with how you are reading, and that's how you're going to get consistent, accurate, non-muddy readings, is when you are figuring out your correspondences and being consistent with them. So first, let's just do a couple random 3 cards, and then we'll pull it out a little bit more. So I'm going to place the center card and then the 2 on either side that are modifying it. So before we even look at the cards, before we even start to interpret the cards, we can just look at it purely elementally. Here we have wind, so we have an air energy that has an air card on one side and an earth card on the other side. Air and earth are enemies, and this weakens. However, air and air bolster. This forms a bridge and it strengthens this one. But we also have to look here and see, okay, air and earth are enemies, and in a sense they cancel themselves out. So that tells us that we just need to read the 5 of wind here as basic structure as what it is. There's not any big weight being given to this. It is simply what it is. It's still the focus card, but it's simply what it is. But we can think about, okay, the 5 of Winds. So here we have, this would be the 5 of Air. This is about discord. In this deck, they have the keyword to being about fear. It's about having expectations and not being sure whether, indecisiveness, unsurety. You're not sure if things are going to happen, and so you're having this internal, because this is about mental. Air is about the mind, and so 5 is disruptive, and so we have a disruption in our mental sources. Well, this is air also, and it is going to support this. Well, what is supporting it? It's the Magician. The Magician is about saying, okay, you're feeling very fearful, you're feeling very kind of blocked and disrupted by these mental things that are going on. What is going to help you is the fact that you have to understand that you have everything at your disposal. This is the Magician who can pull out from the air, from the atmosphere, pull into manifesting it in the physical world. And so this is a message bolstering this up and saying, yeah, things are really rough right now, but you really need to remember that you've got everything that you need. You've got everything you need to manifest what it is that you want. And so we don't have to have this fear. We just simply need to, depending on the question, obviously, I'm just kind of winging this. This isn't really a question. Well, then we might look and see, okay, well, here's the 10 of Earth over here, which is about the great work. This is a good card, and we can read this positively, right? But if we want to read it in terms of elemental dignities, we can also say one of the things that might be because this is kind of weakening it. They're the enemies. So one of the things that might be causing this disruption is too much focus on the end goal of everything's going to be perfect, needing to have everything be that perfect 10 of Earth, everything lined up correctly, everything going just right. That actually might be causing some of the stress. And so kind of bringing it back down to you've got everything that you need. Focus on each of the next steps that you need to manifest. Don't be looking so far at this. So even though this is a positive card, because elementally it's weakening this, we can say is not helpful to this particular card. We can say, okay, that could be part of the cause. Also, again, the other way you could look at this, and this is where, of course, everything comes to intuition, and it comes down to the question. But you can also say that having putting your eyes on the prize, understanding that everything's going to work out fine, is going to weaken the influence of this disruption. See if does that make sense? So we have this middle card, which is the focus here of the 5 of Winds, and we can say to ourselves that we actually want this to be weakened, right? We actually don't want this to be strengthened, depending on how you look at it. You could say, okay, well, the way that you're going to reduce that disruption down is by getting a clear understanding of what it is that you're looking for, understanding that you can, looking at other ways in which you have been successful. See what I mean? So there's still, as with everything, there is still everything to do with card reading is surrounded by our intuition, the question, the person we're reading for. And so it is a combination of all 3 of those things that are going to create a reading that makes sense for that particular situation. So some of it's just going to simply be about, what is the question? Who are you reading for? That kinds of thing is going to influence how you particularly read this. But sometimes it's great to have, let's say, a more negative based card. To have 2 cards that weaken it is good, because we don't want that influence. Let's say we have a Tower card that comes up, and we have 2 cards that bring that down and weaken it. That card influence turns from being the Tower, which is like crazy. All right, I think I just lost a chunk of things, but I was going with, suppose that you have a card like the Tower. The Tower is a fire element, right? So if we had, let me find some, let's say we had the Emperor, and let's say we had the One of Fire, right? So those, or the Wheel of Fortune, those would certainly not be good, but let's just say we had this, or would not necessarily be bad, but they would be very disruptive. So if we have the Tower that has fire and fire on either side, we know that there's probably going to be this is probably going to be a major upheaval that's going to be very, there's a lot of energy there that's going to impact it. So that's going to put a heavy amount of importance there. But if we, let's say, have let's do it the opposite. Here is water. And I should have been much more prepared, but here's more water. So if we have the Tower and we have water and water on either side, that greatly reduces the effect of the Tower. The Tower energy is still in play, but it may be, instead of a major upheaval, it might be a minor shift and a change, and something that's going to be much less of an impact on the person's life than the Tower would be if it had fire on either side. Does that make sense? So, so it can really add depth of meaning to a particular reading if, especially when you have multiple cards and you want to see what are the important cards, what are the cards that I really need to focus on. It doesn't mean that we don't read all the cards. It just means that there could be some of more impact and some of less impact. Now, I don't use this all of the time, but I really do like it when I do a 9 card. So let's say, for example, I don't know if we're going to be able to see. Well, let's see what we can do here. So there's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1. Yeah. We're a little tight, but we can get it all in here. There we go. So if we're doing a 9 card reading, when I'm doing sets of 3, the middle cards are by very nature important to me. That's simply how I read anyways. And so if we look at these as the main factor, so if this is a body, mind, and spirit, so to speak, which is what I will often do the 9 cards with, at least the reading that I do, and it has 3 different decks and it has 3 different layers. Well, I can really have found that using the elemental dignities often can really help to say, okay, what's really coming to the foreground here? So before we even look at these to read, although generally I will kind of read the cards as is first and then start to build the layers with the dignities. But for this example, let's just look exactly what we're looking at. So here we have earth that is surrounded by earth and water. Earth and water they like each other, they are friends, and they support each other. So this lends support to this up here in the realm of spirit. There's some strength there. Here we have fire that has wind and water. Well, fire and water are enemies, and wind and fire are friends. So this does have some impact, but it's not as much. We also want to see how these coordinate together. Earth and water, again, are friends, supporting each other to support this. Wind and water, so air and water, are also neutral. They're not going to fight against each other. So this isn't going to cancel this out. So we are going to see a little bit of a more of an impact here. Here we have water with earth and fire. So again, we have earth supporting it. However, and earth and fire are neutral. So again, we have, these two have, some extra energy being given to them, but this has the most energy being given to them because water and earth are friendly and supportive. Earth and earth are extra supportive of each other, and earth and water together are supportive. So the realm of the 9 of earth is going to have extra impact here, and we're going to pay extra attention to this particular card in the reading. So the realm of spirit has the most impact, and this card in particular has the most impact as well. So all of these end up being fairly supportive. So, but look, within it, we can see, okay, well, here we have the Father of Cups in the, let's say, I do this as body, soul, and spirit. So in the realm of the internal of the soul, the inner self, we have the Father of Water bringing structure, bringing stability to the emotional realm, that sort of deep inner emotion. And what is lifting that up is the Brother of Earth, or the Knight of Earth, that sort of energetic moving forward energy of the questing energy of the earth, finding stability, is because we have the Brother of Earth, the questing earth here. So we have finding stability and stabilizing the inner emotions that are going on. That's very important. We have what the fire, though, is combating this. And so what could stop that structure, right, would be what could be keeping that from being able to utilize itself. We have as resurrection, which is like the judgment card, but so we think of that as in shadow, if it's going to stop a stabilizing inner energy. And so then this would tell me that they may be paying to, they may not be doing. So for me, the judgment card or the resurrection card is about acknowledging where you've gone wrong, acknowledging the choices and decisions that have gotten you to this point, as well as seeing the things that were outside of your control that got you to this point, and then being able to put those to rest and move forward. If this is in shadow and in danger of stopping our sense of inner calm and our inner structure of our emotion, deep emotions, then this would be in shadow, and I would be saying, okay, you are putting too much weight on your, yes, you've made choices and decisions that have gotten you here, but it's time to let those things go because they are stopping you from having a stable inner self. Does that make sense? So the fact that this is fire, if you're reading it in this manner, not every reading is like that, but if you're reading it with elemental dignities, the fact that fire and water don't mix and are within the context of this reading can tell me some extra information and tell me what cards may be in shadow, what cards aren't, which cards are important, which are being lifted up, what's being really said, hey, this is really important up here. And so you can use elemental dignities to get more and more layers that come out in a particular reading, especially multi-card readings. I think they really shine in that scenario. And this is just a very quick touch on my take of elemental dignities. Now, again, a link in the description box for a site that is devoted to this. There's also a good article, I think, on Mary Greer's blog about elemental dignities and the importance of whatever it is, however you choose to do this. The key, again, is consistency and just figuring out what it is that you feel about it and then applying it consistently. If I can find that, I'm pretty sure it was Mary Greer's blog, but if I can find that, I will also put a link to that below. So let me know in the description box, do you use elemental dignities in your readings? Do you always use them? Or do you sometimes use them? Like for me, there are certain readings in which I pay attention to them. If I'm confused about a card or I need to get more information about something, I spread out sometimes to this. But it's not like the very first place that I go. Except for in certain specific readings. And so again, I only kind of did this walkthrough, this kind of basic idea of elemental dignities because I used to get asked it a lot. I haven't recently. And so I thought, okay, let's just kind of look at what are elemental dignities and how might that apply to a reading. So I'll be interested in the comments below if you use elemental dignities, and if you do, you do something differently than what I've just lined out. The more the merrier in terms of gaining information on how people may or may not use this layer in tarot. So I hope that you find this of interest, and there is much out there about it. There are, I'm sure, probably books about it. And so, if this is something that piques your interest, there, I'm sure, is much digging in that you could do for this as well. So I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.